The Laura Ingraham Show.
I think his stance on immigration was one of the driving forces behind his victory. Well, because for Middle America, for the old Rust Belt, for Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, I think it was part of a package, a part of a populist message that focused on taking care of Americans first. And it's not that we're anti-immigrant, not that we don't want people to come here who want to assimilate and have a great role in society, but it was a sense that we had really fallen off the cliff as far as enforcing the law, especially at the border. Well, forget interior enforcement; that had really fallen off. Well, there were a few workplace raids under Obama. Then the left went crazy, and they kind of pulled back on that as well. But after that 2014 surge at the border, that was preceded by Eric Cantor losing his primary challenge by, of course, Dave Bratt. After that surge at the border, even Barack Obama said, these people aren't going to be able to stay. They're not going to be able to stay. Most of them are going to have to go home. Well, most of them didn't go home. And I think people had a long memory. They understood what was happening. There was a flood zone in Texas and Arizona, California. Not so much in California as far as crossing the border, because there actually is decent border enforcement in that small stretch in California. But at Texas especially, we had seen this massive crush at the border. Texas itself decided to deploy its own forces at the border to do the job the American government refused to do. And what's very disconcerting to me is when we seem to be getting mixed signals from cabinet members in the Trump administration on border enforcement. Behind closed doors, according to reports today, the Secretary of DHS is saying one thing, and then in front of the cameras, he's saying another. Now, let me read you something from the CNN report about this recent meeting that the Secretary of Homeland Security, John Kelly, had with Senate Democrats, where he said he does not intend to separate mothers and children at the border, apparently walking back an earlier statement that he had made that such a policy could deter people from entering the country illegally. Kelly met with Senate Democrats yesterday for more than an hour to discuss the administration's immigration policy, a meeting that some members left in frustration, but many others called positive. Kelly also said he intends to hold a conference this spring on improving conditions in Central America and discuss the status of deferred action recipients in the wide-ranging meeting. Those are the dreamers. Well, so which is it? Are we enforcing the border, the laws at the border? Or is our primary mission going to be to keep families together? In other words, if a father has made his way to the United States illegally and is living in, let's say Arlington, Virginia, and a 15-year-old comes across the border, is it our duty as American citizens, the American government, to unify them in the United States? Is that our duty? Or is it our duty, and frankly our solemn obligation to the American people, to enforce the rule of law as it's written in order to deter future crossings? Because when you tell people our goal is to keep families together, what the immediate conclusion will be is keep them together here, not keep them together in Guatemala or El Salvador or Honduras or Mexico or any of the places where people are coming here illegally. And from what I could gather during this campaign, the reason people really appreciated, I think, Donald Trump's courage on this matter is because he was willing to say and pledge to do what others were afraid to say and would certainly not do. So you have the DHS secretary who goes on television and, well, I'll let you be the judge. Let's listen.
If you get some young kids who are coming in, manage to sneak into the United States with their parents, our Department of Homeland Security personnel going to separate the children from their moms and dads?
We have tremendous experience in dealing with unaccompanied minors. Yes, I am considering, in order to deter more movement along this terribly dangerous network, I am considering exactly that. They will be well cared for as we deal with their parents.
But you understand how that looks to the average person who is,
It's more important to me, Wolf, to try to keep people off of this awful network.
Well, keeping them off the awful network means telling them if they come here, they're not going to stay here. The reason attempted border crossings have decreased, according to the Border Patrol, is because the word is out. You come, you're not going to be able to stay. If there appears to be any wiggle room on that, and that we're going to go back to the old way of doing things, if there's any sense of that, what do you think is going to happen? The surge will come again. The crossings will resume. And it was up to us, I think it's up to all of us. And remember what Steve Bannon said, hold us accountable. You bet. You bet we're going to hold you accountable. That means you must do what you said you were going to do. The rule of law applies to everyone. And if we learn that someone who's crossing the border has family members illegally in the United States, they all should go. They all have to go. That's information we can use instead of, oh, well, they can come and they can get relocated and they can stay. The most recent reporting and the federal reporting on this, on how many illegal aliens show up for their immigration hearings. And this was back in 2015. That's the most recent group of statistics that we have here. 4 in 10, only 4 in 10, I should say 4 in 10 skip their immigration hearings. There's a 37-page study done, and it draws on statistics and interviews with unnamed immigration judges. It paints an image of a dysfunctional court system and argues that political appointees of former President Barack Obama made the situation worse. Those observations come from the judges themselves. Actual failure to appear rates nearly doubled or more than doubled what the courts told Congress. Originally, what they reported to Congress, the truth is much worse. They described a system plunged into turmoil by appointees at the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security who ignored statutes, precedent, and regulation, and imposed policies that dramatically increased, here's the kicker paragraph, backlogs and nearly halted adjudication. You think we need to drain the swamp here in Washington? Every single one of these individuals who threw a monkey wrench into the system should be out of work today. There is cause for removal of any of these individuals who just can't seem to do their jobs according to the rule of law. And apparently, according to this study, there are a lot of them burrowed into the bureaucracy. In 2015, ready for this? Almost 1 million immigrants ordered deported remained in the United States. 953,506 immigrants who have already been adjudicated as deportable aliens remained here, in many cases, years after receiving their final orders. Why? They don't show up for the appointment to leave. They just don't show up, and we don't do anything about it. There is no interior enforcement. That number represents a 58% increase from 2002. This report and the article on it is on lifezet.com. I want you to send this around to all of your friends because it paints a picture of a wholly dysfunctional, and I would say beyond dysfunctional, I would say corrupt system. This is a corrupt system to its core. with people burrowed into the bureaucracy who have a political agenda. Their agenda is to, I'll say it again, flood the zone. That the system is so overwhelmed, and people just throw up their hands and say, well, what are we going to do? We got to let all 11 million stay. I mean, we got most of them got to stay. 80% have to stay. The hardened criminals have to leave. So what does that do? What message are you saying to those people who have been struggling day in and day out to support their families, to see that their kids get a quality education in public schools because they can't afford to go to the private schools where the fancy people go, where, frankly, they don't have to worry about illegal immigrants? What do you say to those people? This is your duty to allow all these people to be here. It's your responsibility, American taxpayer, beleaguered middle class person. It's your responsibility to see to it that these families are unified, not in their home country, but in the United States. What do you say to them? Well, Donald Trump had a message for them. I'm here for you. How many times on the campaign trail did Donald Trump say, I'm here for the forgotten man and woman. I'm here for you. No one's been representing you. I'm here to represent you. So I would say that the DHS secretary ought to be very consistent about what he says about immigration enforcement at the border behind closed doors to Democrats and when he's doing an interview with Wolf Blitzer. That messaging better be consistent with what Donald Trump campaigned on, and it ought to be very clear. The rule of law applies. We've had plenty of DHS secretaries who didn't believe that. And we need a DHS secretary who represents the American interest in American security and the rule of law first and foremost. When we come back, a Hawaii judge extends the travel ban. Now it's a permanent injunction, not a temporary injunction in place. Once again, Robert Bork was right all those years ago. It's time to circumscribe the jurisdiction of an out-of-control judicial system. These judges are running wild. And now a Hawaii federal district court judge can affect all of U.S. immigration policy when we know that these opinions and these rulings are wholly based on a fanciful reading of our Constitution and federal statutory law. But it doesn't matter. The tyranny of the judiciary. Until Trump gets these federal courts stacked with his appointments, you're gonna keep seeing this, my friends, on every major policy. We're going to take a break. We'll get to all your calls. Donald Trump and the Gallup daily tracking is down to 35%. Do you think that's because he's distracted on side issues, the media bias, or that he's being pulled into a frankly, anti-populist direction on some policies? We'll get your reaction to that. Congressman Phil Rowe is going to join us. He insists that, we're not giving up on this Obamacare repeal as we hear some good news on that front. A lot more coming up. I don't care what Mitch McConnell has to do. I don't care what legislative magic he has to pull out of his hat here, but he has got to start getting this done. And let me tell you something. He also has to get the U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer confirmed. My goodness, what is the problem with that? Everyone, Mitch McConnell's so brilliant. Mitch McConnell's so brilliant. Get Bob Lighthizer confirmed. I'm beginning to think there's a plot against Bob Lighthizer not to get him confirmed. You know why? Because he's awesome. He is a phenomenal thinker, and he knows more about these trade agreements than anyone living, frankly. And he was Reagan's deputy USTR at a very young age, brilliant. He had a phenomenal hearing, by the way. His confirmation hearing was just beautiful. He's brilliant. And they're going to be talking to President Xi of China. Go ahead and USTR. So you get Gary Cohn, who wants to push through every trade agreement in the White House. And you got Bannon. Bannon's all by himself out there on the trade issue. So you need Bannon and Lighthizer versus Gary Cohn and Dina Powell and the whole globalist crew there. All right, we'll get to your call. Everyone be patient. I know you got a lot of people on the board. I'm going to get to your calls about what's happening to our rural communities, to public schools, without the rule of law in place at the border and border enforcement. Donald Trump's down at 35% daily tracking. That's his core supporters. It's not unheard of that you have low ratings like that, but he's got to become more popular, and it's got to happen fast. And we should be able to get this done. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Congressman Phil Rowe here on the Laura Ingraham Show, who supported Trump after he announced. Was one of the earlier supporters of Donald Trump. He's also he's a member of the Physicians Caucus. First, we got to go to Kelly in Iowa. I'm sure the congressman's going to want to hear, if he's on the line, what our callers are saying about this immigration wiggle that's going on. Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, Laura. My son was a fifth grader in the public school. He went K through 5, and in fifth grade we had to pull him out of public school for the very reason that you're talking about. The schools are flooded with these illegals coming in, going into our public schools, overwhelming our teachers. They have to take them. So the classroom sizes balloon to sizes that are hard for the teachers to manage. And then my son, who was an average student that needed help and assistance in reading, was having a difficult time because of all of these new students creeping in every, several weeks. He would be getting somebody new in his class. We had to finally pull him out of public school and put him into a private school for the very reasons that you're talking about.
Where were you? Were you in Iowa or somewhere? Were you in Iowa?
In Iowa.
What town?
Yeah, Des Moines.
In Des Moines. Well, the fancy people don't have to send their kids to the public schools. They don't go to the public schools in Northern Virginia or out in Sterling, Virginia, or in various parts of the country where we've decided to just either flood the zone with refugees or put the welcome out for illegal immigrants or illegal aliens. They don't have to send their kids to school. They're not affected by any of this. All they get is the benefits, the cheap landscaping, the yard work, the stonemason, the nanny. They get all this. But with the regular people just left to pick up the tab and suffer. And I guess the message to you is just suffer. It's an outrage. I went to public schools, K through 12, and it's hard enough to teach kids of different abilities without having to teach people in 17 languages, as we know happens in Montgomery County schools today, Montgomery County, Maryland. It's completely beyond the pale. And we've done this to ourselves. That's the saddest thing. It's not any outside force that's done this. We've done this just because we refuse to enforce the rule of law. Joining us now, Congressman Phil Rowe, also a physician, who's been in part of these difficult negotiations on health care. And as a physician, he has a unique take on the challenges on our health care system today. And I'm delighted he's with us. Congressman, great to talk to you. How are you?
Oh, Laura, it's great to be with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm always optimistic. I think with the force of being right on an issue and passion and the substantive approach that I know people like you have taken and others, we can actually make real progress in this country. But the healthcare quagmire and not seeing real progress on that over the past few weeks really did demoralize, I think, a lot of conservatives. It demoralized them.
It did, and it demoralized me a little bit. But I felt like we hit into a double play using a baseball metaphor. But look, we've been working through the weekend. I got up last Saturday morning. I said, look, this is too important. It's not about me. It's about the people I represent. And Laura, let me tell you a little bit about my district. It's a rural Appalachian district in East Tennessee. I'm a 31-year practicing physician, Army veteran. And I represent some of the greatest people in the world. And a third of my counties now have nowhere they can purchase health insurance on the exchange. And I'm thinking, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find people who have nowhere to buy insurance, and it's an exorbitant cost. And the people that I felt the sorriest for, there are people who got a subsidy that did okay with this thing, but the working of small businessman, a farmer in my area, they've seen their premiums go from $500 a month, which is not a small amount of money, to north of $1,500 a month, and they can't afford it. And the state of Tennessee, 160,000 people last year chose to pay the fine, penalty, tax, whatever Judge Roberts wanted to call it, and not buy health insurance. Some of them actually paid the fine and bought Farm Bureau insurance. Think about that, because that was what met their families' needs.
Oh my gosh. You know, it's both heartbreak and it's fury. I think the voters went to the polls in November because as you know well, I mean, they're beyond fed up. And we know what the problem is. No, it's not like we haven't diagnosed, to stay in medical terms, it's not like we haven't diagnosed the problem. But one would think that after 7 years of dealing with Obamacare, the GOP could get together and say, okay, guys, we're unified and we're going to do X. And that's going to make your life better. And instead, what I think happened is the Trump administration decided to kind of offshore most of the work on this, most of it, to the leadership. And the leadership, there are a lot of competing interests going on in these negotiations. And I think Paul Ryan, I think, is a good person, and it's nothing personal, but I don't think he knew his own caucus fully.
It is Laura, I'm going to say this on national radio. We're going to get this done because we have to get this done for the American people. And we have to make health insurance and therefore care for people less expensive. Let me give you a number that will scare you to death, and this is going on around the country to show you how unaffordable care has gotten. I practice medicine in a billion-dollar healthcare system in Northeast Tennessee. We have a medical school, pharmacy school, a branch of St. Jude's Children's Hospital. It's a really great place to live and practice medicine. 60 to 70% of the uncollectible debt in that hospital now are people with insurance. And the reason is to keep this, quotes, affordable. The way they set this scheme up is that they've raised the co-pays and out-of-pocket so high, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per person, that the average person, a fireman or a police officer or whomever, cannot afford to pay it. And that's what we've gotten. And the idea to increase coverage, I agreed with that, and lower cost, I agreed with that. This bill did not do that. It expanded Medicaid. And I'll give you an example. CBO, they're good people. They follow formulas that they're given. They're not dishonest people. But they made a calculation in 2010 that 24 million people would be getting their insurance through the Affordable Care Act. The actual number was 10.4. And almost half of those were people like me who had perfectly good insurance, but I lost it. And I get my health insurance now through the exchange, Obamacare here in Washington, D.C. It's very expensive with a high out-of-pocket. I can afford that, but the average person who lives in Northeast Tennessee cannot.
Paul Ryan spoke about what Plan B might be if you all can't go to a real repeal and all agree on a new approach to health care, and this is what he said.
Plan B is we keep talking to each other and figure out how we get to yes and how we get this bill passed.
So you're not changing the policy. You're just putting more pressure.
No, we're listening to people. And if we can make improvements to this bill, all the better. So if improvements can be made to this legislation that get people to yes, that's great.
Tell me where you come down on this, because, again, the physicians who I know who've been writing great pieces on this for LifeZette, and they were basically unified, and there were some Democrats, Republicans, and they believe that this legislation, however well-intentioned, would not have brought down the cost of health care, and in fact was kind of a Band-Aid, because the mandates are still in there for under 26, certain care mandates. You didn't really have the competition that would reinvigorate the marketplace and bring down costs, and it's not a full repeal. And your friend Rand Paul was on the show yesterday, said it's not a full repeal.
I actually think we're getting there. I really believe we are getting there. There are those of us who are meeting, talking about how you're correct. If we didn't have to pass this bill, if we didn't have the cloture vote in the Senate, the bill would look totally different. I agree with you. We're limited by the reconciliation that we have to pass and what you can get in there and what you can get in this bill. I agree. I wrote a bill for the Republican Study Committee 2 times, and it's a different bill than this. Many of the same things are in here, health savings accounts, those things. And you are correct. If in the individual market, and remember that most people in our country get their insurance through their employer. 160 million of us do. About 74 million get it through Medicaid and about 57 million through Medicare. So we're really dealing with a small segment of the population, and you're absolutely correct. We do need competition. That's what's been wiped out in the country. This Affordable Care Act was supposed to increase competition. It did exactly the opposite, and it did so because the government prescribed exactly what you must buy. It didn't give you and me any latitude whatsoever.
Rand Paul yesterday said he thought there was a 70% chance that health care reform would get done this year. Where do you put that percentage?
I think Dr. Paul is pretty close to being right. This is not easy, and trust me, I felt like a bipolar person. I've been up and I've been down, but I'm not giving up. It is too important, Laura, to get this right, and I think we can. I really believe there's a sweet spot out there that we can get this done.
Do y'all think you should be going on I'm sorry about this, Congressman.
No.
We're talking to Congressman Phil Rose, also chairman of the GOP House Physicians Caucus. Congressman, do you think y'all should be taking a 2-week break, given what's happened in the first?
I would love to stay here. We talked about that yesterday. I am willing to stay in this town or wherever we want to go to sit down, eyeball to eyeball to each other, and it's not a lot. We're not talking about big differences now. And will this bill be perfect when we get? No, it can't be. And the cloture rule prevents a lot of good legislation. I can tell you that right now. I don't think it's going to prevent Neil Gorsuch from being the Supreme Court justice, but it does prevent us from getting the bill that we'd like to get over there to them. We have to pass, or we can pass and be in the rules of the reconciliation.
Well, I just think forget cloture for a moment, because I think regular people listening, they know that that's a vote to end debate and move forward to the substantive vote. Yep. But on the issue of time away from Washington, it's my view that the month Congress takes off in the summer, and in the summer it's about a month. August, all of August, everybody goes to the state fair, and they go campaigning, and the 2-week break now, and I think it's just ridiculous. I just say with everything that needs to be done, Congress would take a few days off for Easter, but no one should be leaving town. No one. With the problems that we have on our plate right now, and with how much Donald Trump, frankly, is struggling in his approval ratings, if Trump keeps going in the direction he's going in with approval ratings, you all are going to be in big trouble in 2018. I could tell you that. You all got to get your numbers up.
Do not disagree, and I think we have a job to do here. I'm certainly willing to sit down and do it as long as we're making progress. And this health care bill has got to get done. The American people need this. It's not about me. It's not about making sure the president looks good. It's about people at home that are being forced out of the market and have no place to go get care. Look, 50% of people, Laura, today that have the ACA as their health insurance are not going to get care because they can't afford it. They can't afford it.
I mean, they're just not going to get treatment at all. Congressman Phil Rowe, Dr. Rowe, thank you so much for joining us. And you heard it from him. Shouldn't leave town. No 2-week break until this gets done. There are way too many breaks when the people are as dissatisfied as they are. 855-40-LAURA. Thank you, Congressman. Stay with us. Cousins, abuelos, abuelas, primas, primos. That's cousin in Spanish. I can't believe I remember my Spanish as well as I do. I really remember my Spanish. I had the greatest Spanish teachers. Looking back on my English, Spanish, and Russian teachers, man, did I have great teachers. I thank the Lord for my school in Glastonbury, Connecticut. I had I think among the best high school teachers you could have. I think about my high school teachers a lot. I think none of them are teaching anymore, but they're amazing people. A lot of men were teaching back then. A lot of men aren't teaching anymore. A lot of women take the place. No problem with that. But there was never this. I was thinking back on this. There was never this concern about the sensitivities of kids who weren't doing all that well in school. We posted you posted GPAs and class rank on the big bulletin board as you walked in to Glastonbury High School, and people ran to it. You wanted to see who was where. Now it's like, oh, you can't do that. It all has to be secret. I'm like, oh my God, we were dissing each other. If you weren't in the top 10 of our class, like, aha, you're 11. Aha, you're 15. You're 2. He's 1. It made you competitive. Same thing in language classes. We had to memorize long dialogues. We had to spit back words and know our spelling. And I mean, to learn Russian in a public school, and they offered Russian, Spanish, German, Latin. It was great. We also we weren't flooded with illegal immigrants in my high school. I can't imagine how much harder it would have been for my teachers to have taught the middle level kids. We had 3 levels. You wouldn't do this. Low ability. We actually had a low ability, regular, and high ability. So I'm in the low ability class. Well, okay. Well, I hope you get in the middle class soon. Then there was high ability. Yes, I was in high ability, but I had to work hard. Well, it didn't come naturally to me. Languages did, but none of the other stuff did. I've talked about that before. But I think about it a lot. I am so fortunate that to have those committed, dedicated teachers. And if I wish I could see each and every one of them and just thank them. I thanked one of them. My dad's facility where he spent his last years in Glastonbury. One of the folks, and I was walking in. Forgive me, I don't think I've told this story before. Drew, I don't think I have. I walked in one day, and I know I'm off the issue at hand for a moment, but we'll get back to it. I walked in to see my dad. He was in the Alzheimer's unit, the memory care they call it. And I walked in, and it was the first time I had visited him there. He had to be transferred from the regular unit. It's kind of how it works. You're in the regular, then you get moved to the memory care unit. It's heartbreaking. And I looked on the wall. They have the name tags on the different residents. And I looked to my left, and it said Mrs. Stanwood. Didn't have her first name. And there was Mrs. Stanwood, who was my 8th grade English teacher, who was fabulous. Tough as nails. Oh, was she a tough teacher. Fabulous. She had, I remember her big white kind of plastic pearls, like the Wilma pearls, on Flintstones. She had short, blondish hair. A wonderful writer. We read Shakespeare and we had read the Bible in school. Memorized Shakespeare and sonnets, and it's phenomenal. Did Moby Dick, all these great books. So I asked the nurse in charge. I said, "Is Mrs. Stanwood? Could you point her out to me?" And they pointed her out to me at one of the tables in the lunchroom. And I went up to her and I looked, and I could tell it was she. It was Mrs. Stanwood. And I'd asked the nurse, how far along is she in her memory loss? And she said, well, she remembers things from a long time ago. So I walked up to her and I said, Mrs. Stanwood, it's Laura Ingraham. You taught me 8th grade at Gideon Wells Junior High School, and you were I still remember you. You were such a great teacher. And she looked at me and she said, Laura Ingraham. And she said, not only do I remember you, but I remember that you talked a lot in school. Oh, I said, what? She said, you were an excellent student, but you talked a lot. I said, oh my gosh. Her memory hasn't gone. She remembered. I did have the gift of...
That's what she remembered?
She remembered. But she said, you were an excellent student, but you had the gift, basically I had the gift of gab. Well, and I said, well, you wouldn't be surprised to know that I'm a radio talk show host and a political commentator. But what I thank you for the most is I'm a writer. And what you taught me about writing and diagramming of sentences and grammar. You all want to know why I'm such a grammar Nazi? It's because of Mrs. Stanwood. But and to see her who's such a vibrant person, and now, in a wheelchair, she can't walk, and she lost her short-term memory, and a few moments later she had forgotten that I was there. Oh, it just hit me in the heart. I mean, it was just one of those moments where I was then watching my son, bouncing a ball with her because he went, kind of played with the elderly people that were there, and they bounce a beach ball to keep their reflexes and so forth. It was just one of those moments where I was just, oh. And I said a prayer, and I said, thank you for having given me the gift of education. And I said say to my kids every morning before they go to school, remember that there are millions of people across this globe, across the world, who have no access to education. I don't want to hear any stories about how you're not listening in school, how you're misbehaving in school. I got a report yesterday from 2 of the boys' teacher. Not listening. Oh, Dimitri's rolling around on the ground, not getting up. Oh, he was in trouble with me. In trouble. Okay, you see that teacher? I go and see her? She's your teacher. You disrespect her, you disrespect me. I mean, he's just a kid. He's like rolling around. No. We don't do that. We don't do that. And I just think of how blessed we are to have dedicated teachers today who are in there trying to teach kids in public schools where they're fighting with electronics in the classroom. They're fighting attention deficit, increase of attention deficit. They're fighting, frankly, the pharmaceutical industry who has too many of these kids on drugs. Now they're fighting bad policy, government lack of enforcement of our immigration laws. We have too many kids in the classroom, aren't assimilated, can't speak the language, and frankly, with the way we teach, aren't frankly encouraged to get immersed into our languages. It is hard for them. It's a long-winded way of addressing all this, but anyway, we'll get to all your calls. 855-40-LAURA. That's a fun thing to do. Share your best anecdotes about your favorite teacher, the teacher you remember whose approach to teaching you remember to this day and made a difference in your life. I just told you the story about Mrs. Stanwood. We learned gerunds and past participles and independent clauses and dependent clauses and antecedents, and all of that I remember to this day. And I'm shocked to see how many people who are in their 20s and 30s have no desire or no knowledge of basic grammar. It's a shock to me. But I had a great teacher. So who was your great teacher, and why did that teacher's approach to teaching change you, stay with you, encourage you? A lot of people need encouragement from teachers as well. Be encouraged to be better. It's hard. It's not like those teachers don't have their own problems. On the immigration issue, I want to remind all of you to go to immigrationpause.org. Go there right now. Ask 10 friends to do the same. We have to do everything in our power to encourage and keep, frankly, President Trump on his campaign promises. Mitch McConnell is not interested in putting aside money to build that border wall. I tell you, send a message to old Mitch McConnell. Find that money for that wall. Find that money. Donald Trump has got to stay true to that promise to build the wall. Got to do it. I mean, how many of you would volunteer to work on the wall? Oh, by the way, we'll get to your calls. Hispanic contractors offered to build Trump's border wall. Then they started getting death threats. This just came out yesterday in the Washington Post. For the Hispanic-owned construction firms daring to bid on building a piece of Trump's border wall, this is the emotional price of doing business. One company's tractor was stolen. Others had profanity and rocks hurled at them. Owners say they've been accused of betraying their community. See, it's not the American community. Their community. Making our point about a lack of assimilation. It's my country. I'm going back to my country. It's my community. Well, your country is the United States. Wait, I thought you were American and everything except a piece of paper. My country. Well, I speak Spanish, so I speak with a lot of these contractors. I hear that a lot. I'm going back to my country, mi país, and I speak in Spanish back to them. And I say, well, let's practice. Debemos practicar español. Debemos practicar inglés. Speak English to me. Habla inglés conmigo, and hablo en español contigo. I'll speak with you in Spanish. You speak to me in English. And they say yes, and then you get no English back. That's ridiculous. And don't anyone come to me and say, oh, you don't like the Spanish people. I love the Spanish people. I love the Spanish language. I love the Hispanic people. And the ones who are here legally tend to be the people who are most adversely affected by our lack of real enforcement at the border. Now you have some legal immigrants own these companies, and what do they want to do? They want to bid on work. And guess what? They're treated like dirt by the, quote, community. You know who the community is? These are activists who rally together online. They get whipped up by La Raza and these other groups, and the social media hits start coming out. Let's demonize these Hispanic contractors. Imagine what happens to the American contractors. California said you're not welcome here. You're not welcome in the state if you bid on the Trump wall. So everybody's welcome in California, except the people who actually want to do the work on the wall. I didn't like that answer by Mitch McConnell at all. I didn't like that answer. That was a couple weeks ago. Paul Ryan was asked about the wall yesterday, and that brings us to find some money. It's a lot of money. You got to find $15 billion. Find the money. He's Mr. Fix-It, Jared Kushner. Find the money for this wall. Put the pressure on put the pressure on Mitch McConnell. The people want this wall built. 855-40-LAURA. We'll get to your calls. The most meaningful I think the most meaningful thing that Donald Trump can do is fulfill his promises. And you'll start seeing his numbers go up. 855-40-LAURA. Best teachers and why. We'll take your calls on that. Don't go away. 3 feet tall. We used to always back into it with a car because we lived up on a hill. Backed into that wall, always getting out of the car and putting the stones back on. I can't tell you how many times we smashed our bumpers going down that darn driveway in Connecticut. It was hilarious. Building a wall, manual labor teaches you a lot. Tires you out at the end of the day. You feel like a sense of accomplishment. But suddenly, very stingy up on Capitol Hill. No money for that wall. No wall for you. I think a lot of people would volunteer to help in the wall. Remember that person who wanted to send one brick for every citizen? I think you need a lot more than that. But maybe not. We'd pay for it. You probably could contribute to the wall and get enough people to support it. Michael in Nebraska, line 2. Favorite teachers. I love these segments. You had a great calculus teacher?
Laura, senior year, every single student that came through this teacher's class and passed got a 5 on the AP test, which is the highest score that you can get. Every single student for 20-plus years. She was an incredible teacher. And the way she did it is just working. You had these take-home tests every Friday. You had to finish them. She would stay with her students until 10, 11 at night. She would put on ER, like late at night, that show. ER, right? She would watch it in the classroom while her students were cranking away finishing. You had to finish it by Friday every single week.
Wow.
So if you made it through her class, then the AP test.
What was her name, Michael? What was her name?
Get a 5.
What was her name?
For God's sakes, I was looking it up, Laura. I'm trying to find it.
Can't remember her name.
I know that wasn't long ago.
Speaking of the memory care unit.
Horrible. I'm a man. Is that a pass? I don't know.
No, it isn't. Get your memory checked. That's not good. Mr. Bain was my calculus teacher, Mr. Bain. And he was the bane of my existence. He looked like a crazy professor. He had a gray beard and kind of longish hair. And I found him so confusing. But the kids who understood math thought he was great. But for me, he wasn't great. He's long passed away. But Bill O'Reilly's coming on. That's going to be fun. He's going to come on and talk. Another book? The book comes out every 5 minutes. It's called Old School. Speaking of old school, we're going to ask him some grammar questions. We'll see how old school he is. Bill O'Reilly will be with us. Don't go away. We need to know the truth about what happened. And the left is going to focus on how the only reason y'all voted for Trump was because of Russia. Or Russia influenced the election, because you can't actually believe that people voted for Donald Trump. That's fine. Find out what happened with Russia, but also find out what's happening in our own intelligence community, where now we learn about Americans' identities unmasked and then leaked to the press. You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction. Let's go to Kevin in Indiana. Kevin, you ran into an old teacher a few years ago. Go ahead.
At the age of 59, I remember every one of my teachers, Laura.
Okay, go ahead.
It was a widow. Yeah, unfortunately, she was a widow. I was selling insurance at the time, and her last name was Bierman. And I asked her, I told her, I said, I had a teacher at Harshman 101, Indianapolis Public School System, Mr. Bierman, who was my 8th grade math teacher. Oh, that was my husband. He died a couple months ago. Anyway, I had got an F in that class.
F? You got an F? It's hard to hear you, my friend. Hold on. You got an F in the class?
Yes, I had an F. And I said, Mr. Bierman, you gave me an F. Mr. Bierman says, Kevin, I did not give you an F. You earned the F. Now I'm going to give you some advice, young man. And he told me, he says, not only do you have to understand how 2 plus 2 equals 4, but you have to understand why. And if you apply that philosophy to everything you do in life, life will be good.
Well, it changes your life when you have a teacher who cares. Now, if you give someone F, it's like a hate crime. Old school. We're talking about the great teachers you've had in the course of your life, people who really changed your life. And it dovetails well into our next subject. Bill O'Reilly has a new book. Well, that's like saying the sun came up today. Bill O'Reilly has a new book, right? The sun came up because he has a new book seemingly every day. This is called Old School, Life in the Sane Lane. He wrote it with his pal Bruce Firestein. And O'Reilly joins us now. Bill, how are you? We're just talking about great teachers. How are you?
I'm the same, which is tragic for everyone.
Oh, yeah. You're grumpy, lost your sense of humor.
Yeah, grumpy. Yep.
Grumpy,
yep.
spinning, no spin zone. I criticized you on air the other day. Can I tell you why?
Sure, absolutely.
I know you love that. Well, you apologized to Maxine Waters. So I started by saying, Bill said he has a James Brown wig. Everyone got all upset. And then you came out and said, well, you didn't dwell on it. But you said, look, the substance of what she says is what you'll be focusing on. And I said, that's fair. But I kicked off a Make Maxine Mad Again campaign because MMMA is like, if you're making Maxine mad again, then you're making America great again. And so I just thought I'd drop that out there. Why'd you apologize? Was it really that negative?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question. It goes right to old school. Look, when you're in a position of responsibility like you are and like I am, we have to basically think about what will happen after we say stuff. And I didn't. I was an early morning shot on Fox and Friends, and I was just playing around. It was obviously a jest. It was harmless. But I gave the opposition, which is a brutally dishonest, hateful crew these days, the far left, I gave them a cannon. And that was foolish. It was foolish for me. And the second thing is that even though some people may disagree with Maxine Waters, I've always said this, the woman believes what she says, and she's got enough, moxie to get up there and just lay it out there, a lot like Bernie Sanders. And I respect that. I respect people who speak their minds. Now, she's desperately wrong on everything. And if you go to her district in California, you'll see that she's been there a long time and that the place is just awful and that her policies and vision of life don't work. But that's what I should have concentrated on rather than a stupid comment that the opposition could ram down my throat. But it actually worked because old school values are if you make a dumb mistake, and I consider that a dumb mistake, you say you're sorry. That's old school.
So you can call her a pinhead. Let me just get this straight. So you can call her a pinhead, but you can't make fun of her wig? Is that the rule, the old school rule?
No, you can't. Look, this isn't the old school rule. This is the snowflake politically correct rule. At this point in our history, you cannot comment on any woman's appearance.
Oh, they do it to Kellyanne every moment. They kill Kellyanne all the time. They've killed Michelle Malkin, killed me over the years. They say the most horrible, awful, rotten things about Trump's face, his hair.
But that's
what they do.
That's not the media that does that. You're a good-looking woman. Anybody that would criticize you would be insane. But what I'm trying to say is responsible people can't criticize any woman's appearance on any level at any time. Not the clothing, not the handbag, nothing. All right? God. That's the PC culture we live in. And it's true. It's horrible. And, how many people have made fun of Donald Trump's hair?
Everybody.
And I wasn't even making fun of her hair. I was making fun of the wig.
I'm sorry. My staff. My staff's all in their 20s. Okay. 20s, early 30s. They were screaming, laughing, and you know what I'm saying. And we got multicultural staff.
It might have been funny.
It was freaking hilarious. It might have been funny,
but it was stupid.
It's like Rickles.
It was stupid, though.
It's like Rickles.
Yes, okay, but I'm not Rickles.
Yeah, well, you can be funny. You can be funny. It is possible to be funny.
I don't want to hurt Maxine Waters' feelings, and I don't. Okay. I don't. All right, I really don't. I'd love to have the woman come on the program, the Factor. And say, hey, look, you're saying all this irresponsible stuff like impeach the president. It's irresponsible. Don't you feel guilty about that? Of course she's going to say no. But that's the conversation I'd like to have, not about her wig. So I was an idiot. I said I was sorry, and that's an old school deal. All
right, Bill, remember when she was going on and on about how the L.A. riots were like a festival atmosphere in the old days in the early 90s? She was like the L.A. riots was like she called it a festival or carnival atmosphere. Like there was the positive side to the L.A. riots. You're right. There's so much substantive to focus on, and I hear what you're saying, but it's all got. I liked your memories of school and and what you learned and in kind of the old school approach, because I actually think a lot of that it ties into why Trump won. Trump won because people think we've gotten too far away from common sense. Forget politics, but just common sense. Like if you want to have a better country, you got to focus on the country. If you want to have a rule of law, it's got to apply to everybody. If you want to have immigration that is welcome, then you have to fight against illegal immigration. Trade is great, but you have to have better trade. Those are kind of old school ideas. I mean, that's not newfangled thinking. It's old school.
Well, I think what it all comes down to is, first of all, I don't think Donald Trump won the election. I think Hillary Clinton lost it. And her appearance yesterday is just another reminder of how lucky the country is. And I mean that sincerely, how lucky the country is that this woman is not president of the United States. She is blatantly dishonest. I mean, to a degree that this is Warren Harding territory. And whether you like Trump or not, he puts forth a vision that he believes is fair. That's the key word for old school. Old school is a point of view. It doesn't have anything to do with values or politics. It's a point of view. But fairness is what he puts forth. So look, it isn't fair if we're going to have a country with laws on the books that says this is how you come here. It isn't fair then to allow 20 million people to violate that law, no matter what they do when they get here. It's not fair. So we have to basically change into a fair country. That was basically Trump's theme, that it's not fair for companies to go overseas and people lose their jobs here. It's not fair for them to hold money over here they could have investing in America. It's not fair for ISIS to run around beheading people and we don't do anything about it. If you come down to what his philosophy is, it's based on what is fair. And old school point of view is that. If you look at the other side and the pernicious, and I mean that sincerely, and I'm not, you know me, I'm not a party apparatchik, I'm an independent, I'm not an ideologue. I mean, what I'm seeing from the politically correct far left is a destructive point of view that's going to harm every single American if it ever comes into power. And Hillary Clinton would have pandered to that.
Well, I think that, I'll take issue with you on one thing. I think Hillary was a terrible candidate, no doubt about it. Very unappealing on a number of levels. But I think Trump did win the election. I think he won it in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Ohio, and Wisconsin, because he was giving voice to those who have gone unrepresented for too long, those who thought we should have better trade deals.
If you analyze the vote, Trump did make inroads into precincts that had not voted Republican before. But the big plus that he had was that so many people stayed home that voted for Barack Obama. They would not vote for Hillary Clinton because instinctively they knew she was not an honest person.
Old school values actually saved me from the 60s. Addiction runs in my family. My maternal grandfather, first cousin, were heavy drinkers, but I never wavered, never hurt myself or anyone else while inebriated because I've never been inebriated. Was that you or Firestein? Was that you?
That's me.
Tell us about that.
Real Mandoni.
Firestein, sorry.
Author, yeah.
Sorry.
That's me. That's me. And that's absolutely true. But it isn't so much a value system. Again, I'm trying to get away from that. I'm trying to get to Americans who, you can be a liberal and you can be old school. You can be conservative and you can be a snowflake. And that was a very important part of my life because all of us who were raised in the 60s and went to school, I went to school in the late college into late 60s, early 70s, were subjected to a heavy dose of drugs are great, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Here, take all these drugs. And a lot of people got hurt in a way. I mean, at least 3 people in my Leviton neighborhood are dead from drug overdoses, okay? But I always resisted because my cousin and my grandfather, and I saw the alcoholism, and I knew that it was in the Irish DNA of my family, and I just said, you know what, I'm not going to do this. It wasn't so much that my parents drilled it into me or the teachers in the Catholic schools that I went to drilled it into me. It was my own observations. It was an old school observation. Look, I'm going to get through this without intoxicants. Now, I'm not condemning people who drink wine or beer or whatever or smoke a little pot, but if it becomes a focal point of your life, you're in trouble. And I knew that, and I stayed away.
Well, Trump had the same reaction to alcohol with his brother dying, and he.
Oh, that's one of the reasons that Trump and I get along so well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've gone to games and events over the years because he doesn't drink, and he saw the same thing. His brother, I guess, his brother got in big trouble with it.
Not Fred.
And that was something that Trump and I had in common. That's why I always had to buy him vanilla milkshakes. I mean, it's like, don't you have any money? You're a billionaire.
No, they never pay. They never pay.
No. I mean, I'm looking at the guy and go, come on, but no, he was very generous to me, has always been generous to me.
I like the idea of old school, and I like your point, and it's what I say about the elites. You can be a Republican elite or a Democrat elite. You could be someone who didn't grow up wealthy and have an elitist attitude or not, and kind of the same thing applies to the old school approach to life. Life in the Sane Lane. It's our featured selection on LauraIngraham.com. Bill, come back soon. It's always great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate it.
All right, no problem. We'll take a break. Don't go away.
Laura, my high school art teacher saw potential in me that I never really did. I was a punk in high school, barely graduated, and she saw something in me and pushed me, and I've been a professional artist for 25 years now. And, it's wonderful that I had someone to actually push me to where I needed to be.
I love it. What a great story, Brian. Not everybody has to be an A student in everything, but she found your talent and encouraged.